Hello, friends! So, you have been separated from your spouse for a couple years. Maybe you've met someone new, and you've thought to yourself, I'll just move on. You've fallen in love, maybe even tied the knot. Except, small detail, you haven't officially untied the first one, meaning that you're still legally married to your first spouse. If that's the case, congratulations! You have officially committed bigamy! And it's not the sexy HBO scandal that you thought it may be, huh? Well, on today's video, we'll talk about what happens if you intentionally or not end up legally married to two, or I guess more, people. We'll unpack how this happens, what Florida law says about it, and what you can actually do in order to fix this situation before your life turns into the next episode of Law and Order Family Court Edition. So stay tuned for all of that. Welcome back to the Divorce Broadcast. My name is Manny Segarra, coming to you from Miami, Florida. All right, so how do people actually end up, and I'll say sometimes unwittingly, in this whole bigamy mess? Well, you got to remember that sometimes a married couple, they'll quote-unquote separate. They'll go their own separate ways. Maybe they'll move out of state, out of the country, or to a completely different location. And as the years go by, they never officially get divorced. They may end up with a new partner. They may buy a new house, open up a new business, sometimes even have kids with that new partner, all the while being legally married to that first spouse that they separated from. Remember, legally, until a judge enters a final judgment of dissolution of marriage or corresponding or equivalent order, officially dissolving that party's marriage, they are still legally married. Under Florida law specifically, until and unless a marriage is dissolved by a final judgment or some other legally recognized manner, like the death of one of the spouses, you are not allowed to get remarried legally until the first marriage is dissolved. Just to kind of give an analogy, it's like when you're on a computer and you open up a different window while you have another one open. That other window that you just kind of went away from but is still up and running, it's in the background eating away at your computer RAM or memory. Same thing for an undissolved marriage. Even though you have started a new life and maybe have kids with your new partner, until that first marriage is dissolved by a court of competent jurisdiction in Florida, you're still legally married. Yikes! Next up, let's talk about what Florida law says about bigamy. And it is not very often that I get to put my former prosecutor hat on this channel. As many of you know, I was a prosecutor with the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office for 8 years at the beginning of my career. So let's use that experience to talk a little bit about what the Florida criminal bigamy statute says. And I'm going to read directly from the statute. It is Florida Statute 826.01. It makes bigamy a third-degree felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a $5,000 fine. There is a little bit of a nuance with the bigamy statute. I will say to you that if the person who is charged reasonably believed that their marriage was either dissolved or that their former spouse was dead, then that person actually may have a defense. Or if the first marriage is void or voidable for whatever reason, technically that person may possibly be found not guilty of bigamy. Also, I don't think that bigamy charges are really prosecuted that often, but you never know. This is something that the state has great discretion on, so it kind of depends on what jurisdiction that you are in. However, having said all of that about the criminal aspect of bigamy, even if the bigamy or the dual marriage is not criminally prosecuted, everyone must remember that that second marriage, the subsequent marriage when the person is already married, is void ab initio, meaning it is void from the moment that it happens. So in Florida, your second wedding, while you're still married to that first person, it may look nice. There may be beautiful photographs, but legally it's just cosplay. It is fake because you know what? That second marriage under Florida law is not valid if either party is still legally married. So why does this matter? I love getting into the whys on this channel. We're going to talk about the real world consequences of being in a bigamous marriage, meaning being married to two different people at the same time. Before we dive in, remember we did a whole video on this issue, the consequences of being married to two people. That video has been running very well. I suggest all of you check it out for a little bit more of an in-depth look. But I'd love to give a quick recap of the consequences, real-world consequences of being married to two people at the same time. Real consequence number one is that the new spouse number two, may not have any legal rights to their partner's either estate, inheritance, homestead, or insurance benefits. That's right. Spouse number one, the old spouse, their inheritance rights may actually trump the new spouse's inheritance rights. This in turn may make for a very interesting situation for either end-of-life procedures or funeral arrangements. I'm sure that these types of situations can get really awkward and at times really heated. Real consequence number two is the child custody / paternity confusion. Remember that a child born during marriage number two may actually legally be presumed to be the child of the first legal marriage, which is still intact. And that could create a huge headache in courts for paternity, child custody, and time-sharing rights. I've seen it happen where a judge will ultimately have to have a hearing and determine who the legal parents are of that child if the first marriage is still legally intact and the second marriage is void because of bigamy. Real world consequence number three, and I've witnessed this with my own eyes as well, is that there is quite an embarrassing and awkward situation when someone stands in the court and they realize that they are still legally married to someone they thought was their former spouse, and a judge informs them, you know what, your first marriage, it's still legally intact. That means that your second marriage is void. I have seen people hear this news and the reactions that come afterwards. The life lesson in this all is that bigamy usually isn't about drama, it's about procrastination. The people not officially getting divorced. And the paperwork, it doesn't care who gets it done, it only cares how it gets done. So this is something that can be totally avoided by following through and getting a divorce officially of that first marriage. Now let's talk about how someone can possibly fix this mess. And when I say mess, it is a huge, unfortunate mess. So that person, if they find themselves married to two different people, they should strongly consider running and filing for divorce yesterday, not today, yesterday, as soon as possible. If they can't find that old spouse because that old spouse has either moved or gone out of state, remember that Florida law allows for divorce by publication. We did a whole video on this, and it is one of our most watched videos on how to get a divorce by publication. Either way, whether it's by publication or the old-fashioned way, they need to divorce their first spouse. Step number two, that second spouse, the new spouse, unfortunately, they probably have to annul that marriage. So there could be a petition for annulment. That second marriage is void ab initio. It is a procedural issue that has to be pled before the court. A lot of times the judges may run the two cases together, but marriage number two needs to be annulled. Step number three, after marriage number one is dissolved by divorce pleadings and marriage number two is annulled by annulment pleadings, then perhaps if that new or second spouse is a nice enough person and is willing to remarry that partner who never told them that they were married to begin with or never finished the deed of getting divorced to begin with, that second spouse and the partner who just got divorced and annulled from them, they can re-solemnize their marriage. They can take their vows again, and their marriage will now be nice and legitimate. And finally, step number 4. If they get remarried to that second spouse, number 4 is to update the inheritance, estate planning, wills, medical directives, all of those estate planning documents. Remember that bigamy requires cleanup of all of those documents that the parties want to at least assure their inheritance rights with. So, if someone has collected spouses like they used to collect Pokemon cards, well, here's their opportunity to evolve, at least legally speaking. Here's a way to get their life back together and make sure that they're married to the person that they want to be married to legally. All right, so before we wrap up, as we always like to do, let's talk about some of the final thoughts and takeaways. Paperwork, it isn't sexy, but it's powerful. Separation, it's a status of the heart, not of the law. And the longer you wait to get the divorce from that old spouse, the messier it could get. There could be new kids involved. There can be taxes. There can be inheritance rights. There can be medical issues, double marriages, and annulment, all kinds of sanity issues. Keeping in mind that, yes, divorce is hard, but being married to 2 different people at the same time, that's a lot harder. So go get that divorce from that first marriage done before Netflix starts calling and asking for the rights to your life story. All right, so that is officially a wrap on our video regarding bigamy. Bigamy, that sounds like a word from one of those old Shakespeare era plays, but trust me, it's still alive and well in Florida. And if you know anyone that is unfortunately dealing with this bigamy situation, have them look us up at www.segarralawfirm.com. We have offices in Miami and Orlando, Florida. Se habla español. Please do us a favor. Drop a comment on this video in case you may know a situation in which someone was committing bigamy. We'd love to hear the details. Also, please do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the Divorce Broadcast, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you.